The Galactic High Tribunal gathered in solemn anticipation, their massive chamber dimly lit by the eerie glow of 1,000 holographic data streams. The air hummed with tension, thick with the weight of a decision that could alter the course of the known universe. The gathered delegates, representing 100 species, each more advanced than the last, had come to an unprecedented conclusion. Humanity was too dangerous to exist. At the center of the chamber, Grand Arbiter Regzar hovered, his translucent form flickering slightly as his psionic voice boomed across the assembly. We have deliberated long, observed their wars, their absurd resilience, their refusal to adhere to galactic logic, and now we must act. The gathered council members shifted uneasily. Even the warlike Zilkar, whose race had once conquered entire star systems in a matter of cycles, found themselves reluctant to speak first. The humans were primitive. Yes, their technology was laughable compared to the quantum constructs of the Kelthari or the neural mesh systems of the Vireth. Yet time and time again, these mammals had defied every model, shattered every logical expectation. They were chaotic, unpredictable, and worst of all, they were thriving. We tolerated them, came the rasping voice of Counselor Drexel, a reptilian elder from the Xiphos Dominion. Allowed them to spread across their own world like a disease. Watched as they fought themselves, their own wars nearly wiping them out. We assumed they would either destroy themselves or stagnate. But instead, he let out a slow, deliberate exhale, forked tongue flicking in disdain. They evolved. Regzar's presence pulsed. The directive was clear. Species incapable of controlled expansion would be monitored, but interference would be limited unless they became an existential threat. The humans, against all probability, have become that threat. A murmur rippled through the chamber. The evidence was irrefutable. The humans had survived multiple self-inflicted extinction-level events, nuclear tensions, biological warfare, and climate catastrophes. They had stared into the abyss of artificial intelligence annihilation and turned it into a personal assistant. They had discovered faster-than-light concepts centuries before they should have, and instead of using them for peaceful advancement, they had nearly blown up the moon testing them. And then there was the incident. Drexel tapped a claw against his holopad. A massive projection flared to life above the council chamber, showing grainy, zoomed-in footage from a desolate battlefield on a distant human colony. A ragtag force of human soldiers, clearly outnumbered, outgunned, and hopelessly surrounded, had been engaged against the Droken, one of the most ruthless mercenary forces the galaxy had ever known. The Droken had expected an easy slaughter. Instead, what had unfolded had sent shockwaves through the galactic intelligence networks. "Play it again," someone whispered. The projection flickered back to life. The humans, pinned behind crude fortifications, had been on the verge of surrender. Their leader, a scarred, weary man, had radioed his final message to his people. And then, impossibly, the tide had shifted. With no reinforcements, no air support, and no tactical advantage, the humans had won. Not through strategy or superior firepower, but through sheer, unrelenting madness. They had charged, thrown makeshift explosives, used their own casualties as distractions. One had drop-kicked a Droken warlord off a cliff. Another, missing an arm, had used his own severed limb to beat an enemy unconscious. And when it was over, when the Droken had fled in terror from a force they should have easily crushed, the surviving humans had laughed. They had sat amidst the smoldering wreckage, covered in blood and dirt, and cracked jokes. "They are insane," muttered a delegate from the Varkali Trade Empire. "They are effective," corrected Drexel darkly. A deep metallic hum filled the chamber, signaling the voice of High Executor Kazin, an ancient being whose kind had once ruled half the galaxy before retreating into their artificial domains. "They do not fear death. This is their greatest strength, and their greatest threat to us." The assembly fell silent. Regzar finally spoke again, his presence rippling outward. "We must act, not in fear, but in prudence. We cannot allow them to reach the galactic stage in full force. We must end them now, while they are still contained." Another murmur spread, this time laced with discomfort. Are we truly considering extermination? A Calthari delegate asked hesitantly. Genocide is necessary, Kazin interrupted. This is not genocide. It is containment. Would you let a supernova grow until it consumes everything? We could impose restrictions, the Calthari argued. Technology bans, sanctions, interventions. Would you impose sanctions on a wildfire? Drexel sneered. A hush fell. The decision was already made. Very well, Regzar decreed. We shall send an execution force. Not an army, for that would invite disaster. No, we will be surgical in our approach. A precision strike. A ripple of approval spread across the chamber. This was a more palatable solution. Remove the key figures, their greatest warriors, their leaders, their strategists, and humanity would crumble on its own. A slow, quiet death, without the mess of war. We shall deploy our finest, Regzar continued. The best assassins in the known galaxy. They will eliminate humanity's strongest defender before their influence spreads further. Drexel nodded in satisfaction. Who is their strongest? The holographic interface flickered as an intelligence officer, a sleek, cybernetic being, interfaced with the network and projected the gathered data. The council leaned in, and then the name appeared. There was silence, then confusion, then disbelief. This must be a mistake, Drexel hissed. The name remained. Not a general, not a warlord, not even a known military asset. Helena Markov, a human woman seemingly ordinary, living in an obscure human city called Brooklyn. No known current military affiliations. No active role in planetary defense. Regzar turned to the intelligence officer. Explain. The cybernetic being processed for a moment before responding. The name appears consistently across multiple intelligence sources. She is spoken of in hushed tones by human soldiers, feared even by their most hardened warfighters. She has been described as a myth, a nightmare, and in some cases, a force of nature. That proves nothing, Drexel growled. Perhaps, the officer admitted. But there is one more detail. The projection shifted again. A captured message intercepted from a human military channel played in the air, scratchy but clear. If the war ever turns against us, if the impossible happens, unleash the Baba Yaga. A cold weight settled over the chamber. Define Baba Yaga, Regzar commanded. The intelligence officer hesitated. A human legend. A being of unstoppable vengeance. The humans invoke the name in whispers. And this Helena Markov, she is the one they have given the title. Another pause. Then Drexel scoffed. Superstition. Humans are notorious for their ridiculous myths. And yet, Kazin murmured, they also once thought they were alone in the universe. And look how that turned out. The chamber filled with uneasy murmurs. Finally, Regzar raised his hands. No matter the legend, if she is their most feared weapon, she will be neutralized. We send the assassins, the best of the best. If she is a myth, she will fall. If she is a true threat, then all the more reason to strike first. The decision was made. The assassins were chosen. And far away, on a tiny blue world oblivious to the coming storm, Helena Markov stirred in her sleep, unaware that the deadliest killers in the galaxy were already on their way. They would come for her. They would regret it. The ship materialized over Earth in absolute silence, a masterpiece of stealth technology designed to bypass every known detection system. Cloaked in quantum distortion, it was an unseen phantom against the vast backdrop of space. Inside, four of the deadliest beings in the galaxy gathered in the war chamber, their mission precise, their target identified. Zorkan, the Void Stalker, crouched near the hollow display, his reptilian skin shimmering, as if he were part of the shadows themselves. His voice, a whisper woven from the edges of existence, slithered into the air. We descend under cover of night. No resistance. We eliminate her before she is even aware we exist. Sheathrex, the Hive Queen, clicked her mandibles in amusement, her multifaceted eyes reflecting the dim light of the ship. Human prey is primitive. Their defenses are laughable. This will not take long. Kragnock, a hulking mass of bio-armor and sheer brute strength, merely grunted. He was not one for words. He had killed emperors with his bare hands, broken civilizations with his fists. A single human? Not even a challenge. Drelzan, the strategist, sat apart, watching the feed of their target's daily routine with measured focus. Our intelligence is sparse, but precise. Helena Markov is unremarkable by every metric we use. No active military status. No significant ties to power structures. By all accounts, she is retired. His cybernetic eyes narrowed slightly. And yet, they fear her. Deeply. Zorkan let out a soft hiss. Fear is irrational. We are not. No further words were spoken. The decision was made. They would strike before dawn. The descent was flawless. A controlled atmospheric entry, undetected, silent as death itself. They landed in a secluded industrial district on the outskirts of Brooklyn, their ship's cloaking device rendering it invisible. From there, they moved like ghosts. Helena Markov lived in an old brick building, the kind that had survived wars, riots, and generations of human wear and tear. The intelligence dossier was clear. She resided alone, running a small bakery on the ground floor, her living quarters above. Zorkan took point, dissolving into the night. His kind had hunted in total darkness long before the humans had mastered fire. He slithered across the rooftop, blending with the environment, his eyes narrowing as he peered into the dimly lit apartment through a half-open window. She was sitting in a chair near the kitchen, wearing a simple bathrobe, a half-empty bottle of vodka on the table, a cigarette smoldering in an ashtray. Her hair was streaked with silver, her features carved by time and experience, yet there was something about the way she sat, relaxed, but never vulnerable. A quiet lethality coiled beneath the surface. Zorkan whispered into his comms. Target is alone, vulnerable, moving in. The lock was child's play. He entered without a sound, gliding across the wooden floor, approaching her from behind. One strike to the throat, one quick motion, and the mission would be complete. Then she spoke. You know, Helena murmured without turning. A real assassin wouldn't have tripped the creaky floorboard. Zorkan froze. There was a flash of movement. He barely registered it before the glass bottle in her hand smashed into his face with bone-cracking force. He reeled back, vision momentarily blurred. His perfect stealth shattered in an instant. She was already moving. Zorkan recovered quickly, lunging forward with razor-sharp talons. But she twisted, ducking under his strike with an ease that sent a ripple of unease through his trained instincts. She grabbed the closest object, a heavy iron skillet, and swung it with the force of a warhammer. The impact sent him sprawling into the kitchen counter. The comms exploded with chatter. Zorkan report. Engaged, he snarled, shaking off the hit. Sheathrex and Kragnock moved immediately, breaching the front door in unison. Kragnock charged, a living, battering ram, intending to end the fight in one brutal motion. Helena sidestepped. The behemoth plowed straight into the kitchen wall, the plaster crumbling around him. Helena barely paused before planting a boot into the back of his head, driving it further into the wreckage. Sheathrex lunged, her mandibles snapping, a serrated blade in one of her clawed hands. Helena parried with a steel ladle, the clang of metal on metal ringing through the room. With a practiced motion, she twisted Sheathrex's wrist, disarming her, then flipped the alien assassin over the counter with an efficiency that suggested decades of muscle memory. Drelzan had seen enough. Regroup. Now, Kragnock growled, wrenching himself free from the ruined wall. She's fast, but she's only human. Helena cracked her neck, rolling her shoulders. Sweetheart, she said, exhaling a cloud of smoke, if you're still thinking like that, you're already dead. There was a moment of stillness. Then, all four assassins attacked at once. It should have been over in seconds. Zorkan's bladed limbs struck out like whips. Sheathrex's razor-sharp legs slashed through the air. Kragnock swung with the force to shatter bones. Drelzan calculated every possible angle of approach. Helena moved through it all like water, a force of brutal efficiency. She dodged between Kragnok's attacks, using his own momentum against him. A quick elbow strike to Sheathrex's throat sent the insectoid reeling. A knee to the solar plexus knocked the wind from Zorkan. Drelzen saw the inevitable before it happened. We underestimated her, he realized too late. She took down Zorkan first, twisting his own momentum into a bone-snapping impact. Sheathrex followed, slammed headfirst into the counter. Kragnok, enraged, charged wildly. She tripped him, sending him crashing through the dining table. Drelzen made one last desperate move, activating an energy blade. Helena caught his wrist, twisted it, and the blade was suddenly at his own throat. The fight was over. A tense silence followed. The assassin sprawled across the wreckage of what had once been her apartment. Helena sighed, tossing the energy blade aside. Aliens. Always so dramatic. She grabbed the bottle of vodka from the floor, took a slow sip, and turned her attention to Drelzen, who was still frozen, processing the sheer impossibility of what had just happened. "You're going to tell me exactly why you're here," she said, voice calm, almost bored. Drelzen hesitated, his strategist mind already calculating the best path forward. Lying was pointless. His team had been decimated in mere minutes. They had walked into a slaughterhouse, thinking they were the butchers. "You were marked for elimination," he admitted. Helena arched a brow. "Really? Must be my charming personality." Drelzen's expression darkened. "The Galactic Council has deemed humanity too dangerous to exist. You were identified as the most significant threat." Helena laughed. It was not a pleasant sound. The most significant threat? She gestured at herself, still in her bathrobe. "I run a bakery." "You are not just a baker," Drelzen said grimly. "The humans call you Baba Yaga." The amusement left her eyes. A long, heavy silence followed. Finally, Helena sighed. "Guess I should have known they'd come knocking eventually." Drelzen tensed as she reached for something under the counter, but instead of a weapon, she pulled out an old flip phone. She dialed. "Hey, Boris," she said, her Russian accent sharpening slightly. "Yeah, I need a favor." "No, bigger than that. Galactic level problem. MHM. Yeah, just like Belarus. Bring the good stuff." She snapped the phone shut and glanced down at the battered assassins. "You idiots really have no idea what you just started," she said, shaking her head. "But don't worry. You'll get a front row seat to the biggest mistake the Galactic Council ever made." Outside, the first hints of dawn crept over the city skyline. The hunt had begun, and humanity was about to teach the galaxy why you never, ever, pick a fight with the wrong woman. The assassins moved through the abandoned warehouse, their steps measured precise. The city beyond was waking, but inside these darkened corridors, time stretched into something heavy and suffocating. Drelzen kept his movements controlled, his cybernetic eye scanning for heat signatures. He had never felt fear before. Caution, yes. Concern, certainly. But fear was a uniquely human affliction, one that he had always believed himself above. And yet, something primal curled in his gut, whispering that they had made a mistake too great to rectify. Sheathrex clung to the ceiling, her mandibles twitching as her compound eyes scanned the darkness. Her kind had conquered entire worlds through perfect synchronization, hive-mind coordination, and ruthless efficiency. Yet she was alone now, cut off from the buzzing certainty of her swarm. That silence had never felt more oppressive. Kragnok, massive and brutal, flexed his enormous hands, his cracked exoskeleton still bearing the imprints of their last encounter. His rage simmered beneath the surface, barely contained. He did not know how to lose. He had never learned what to do when faced with an enemy who did not fall, who did not break. Zorkan was silent as always, his form blending into the shadows, but even his breath was careful, controlled. Every instinct in his predator's mind told him that they were no longer the hunters. They were the hunted. The transmission from the Galactic Council had been clear. Proceed with the mission. Do not return until the target is eliminated. Failure is not an option. But failure was already here, looming in the dark like something they could not see, but knew was there. "Where is she?" Kragnok growled, his deep voice barely above a whisper. Drelzen adjusted his optical scanner, sweeping the area again. "She's near," he murmured, watching. Sheathrex made a clicking sound deep in her throat. "We should not have come here." "You think we had a choice?" Zorkan whispered back. A metallic clang echoed through the warehouse. Every assassin turned, weapons raised. The sound had come from behind them. No, above. Zorkan moved first, his predator's instinct snapping into place as he leaped onto a high beam, his blades unsheathing. He saw movement, something slipping through the shadows, too fast for him to lock onto. And then the voice came. "You ever hear the one about the scorpion and the frog?" Zorkan pivoted, his eyes scanning every surface. Silence. And then, "The scorpion asks for a ride across the river. The frog says, 'You'll sting me.' The scorpion says, 'No, I wouldn't do that.'" A footstep. Zorkan turned, blades ready. Halfway across, the scorpion stings him. Frog says, "Why?" Scorpion says. A figure stepped into the faint light filtering through the skylight above. "Because it's in my nature." Helena. The moment he saw her, Zorkan moved. A blur of lethal precision, his blades cutting through the air with the kind of speed that had made him the terror of the void. She caught his wrist. Not dodged. Caught. Zorkan had exactly 1 second to process that before she twisted. His body followed the motion involuntarily, his arms snapping at an unnatural angle. He didn't even have time to scream before her knee slammed into his gut, sending him crashing through the rafters. The impact was enough to rattle the entire warehouse. The others moved at once. Kragnock roared, charging through the maze of industrial debris, his colossal fists swinging with the force of a falling meteor. Helena ducked under the first strike, sidestepped the second, then spun low, planting a boot into the side of his knee. Something cracked. Kragnock dropped to one leg, but his momentum carried him forward. He crashed into a steel beam, shaking off the pain with a bellow of fury. Helena moved before he could recover, gripping a rusted chain hanging from the ceiling and swinging onto his back. Her arms locked around his throat. Kragnock staggered, reaching for her, but she had the leverage. His own weight worked against him. The others tried to intervene, but Helena used the moment of hesitation against them. She launched herself off Kragnock's back, flipping through the air and landing with effortless grace. Sheathrex struck next, her bladed arms slashing in precise arcs. Helena parried the first with a crowbar she'd grabbed mid-fall, deflected the second with a sudden pivot. Drelzan watched, his mind racing. It was impossible. She wasn't simply fighting them. She was toying with them. Sheathrex feinted left. Helena didn't fall for it. A brutal counterstrike caught the Hive Queen in the ribs, sending her skittering back. Helena turned to face Drelzan. "You." Her eyes locked onto his. "You're the smart one, yeah." Drelzan's hands clenched into fists. "We will not fail." Helena sighed. "You already have." And then she moved. Drelzan had spent years refining his combat algorithms, predicting enemy movement down to the millisecond. But there was no pattern to her strikes, no predictability. She flowed like liquid, adapting with a speed that no program could replicate. She disassembled him, not just physically, but tactically. Every move he made, she was already 2 steps ahead. Every attack he attempted, she countered before it was complete. Within seconds, he was on the ground, his system struggling to recalibrate. Kragnock tried to rise. Helena drew a knife from her boot and flung it without looking. It embedded into Kragnock's shoulder with a sickening thunk. He didn't get back up. Zorkan tried to vanish into the shadows again, but Helena grabbed a can of spray paint from a nearby shelf and blasted it in his direction, coating his stealth field in a bright neon streak. "You're not as invisible as you think, lizard boy." Sheathrex tried to call for backup. Helena yanked a steel pipe from the ground and swung it into the insectoid's communicator, shattering it. "You won't need that." Drelzan struggled to sit up, breathing hard. "What are you?" Helena wiped a smear of blood from her lip. "You don't get it, do you?" Her voice was calm, steady. "You think this is a mission, some assassination job." She knelt beside him, her expression unreadable. "You just started a war." Drelzan's breath hitched. She stood, rolling her shoulders. You'll tell your council exactly what happened here. Tell them they picked a fight they can't win. Tell them they sent the best they had, and I left them in a pile of their own teeth. She turned to the others. And if they're stupid enough to send more? She let out a long breath. Well, you've seen how that ends. Silence. Helena stretched, rolling her neck, then sighed. Boris will be here soon. He's bringing the big guns. Drelzan's mind was still racing, still trying to make sense of what had happened. But he already knew the truth. They had come to kill a monster. Instead, they had created one. The war had already begun. The Galactic Council chamber was in absolute disarray. Screeches, growls, and mechanical clicks of distress filled the vast, domed hall as delegates from 100 species erupted into chaotic debate. The assassination squad had failed. Spectacularly. And worse, they had returned alive to tell the story. Drelzan stood before them, battered but upright, his cybernetic systems still recalibrating from the catastrophic mission. His remaining team members were in worse shape. Zorkan's once fluid movements were now stiff with pain, his stealth tech barely functioning. Sheathrex was a husk of her former self, her exoskeletal plates cracked, and her hive link permanently severed. Kragnok, the supposed immovable, stood with a permanent limp, his body wrapped in emergency biorepair cells. They had faced wars. They had toppled empires. But none of them had ever looked so utterly, irreversibly defeated. The council members did not take the news well. One human. Drexel spat, slamming his scaled fist against the polished obsidian table. You are the most elite assassins in the known universe, and you lost to one human. Drelzan's voice was steady, but the weight of what he was about to say pressed down on him like a gravitational well. It wasn't just a loss, he admitted. It was a warning. A silence fell over the council, the kind that only came when the impossible had been made real. Regzar, who had presided over the decision to eliminate humanity, leaned forward, his translucent form shifting in unease. Explain. Drelzan exhaled slowly. We underestimated their resilience, their unpredictability. We assumed Helena Markov was a singular anomaly. She is not. Drexel narrowed his reptilian eyes. Then what is she? Drelzan met his gaze. Proof. The word hung in the air like a death sentence. Proof of what? Another delegate demanded. That humans are exactly what we feared they were, Drelzan said. They do not fight like we do. They do not strategize like we do. They are creatures of instinct, of sheer stubborn will. And when you corner them, when you give them no choice but to fight, he hesitated, feeling the echoes of his own failure. They become something else, something worse. Regzar's presence pulsed in agitation. And this Helena, what did she say when she defeated you? Drelzan hesitated, then finally spoke the words that had been haunting him since they had left Earth. You just started a war. The council chamber broke into chaos again. Unacceptable, a Viereth delegate shrieked. We should have eradicated them centuries ago. This cannot escalate, a Kalthari representative added. Humanity is still confined to their single system. You think that will last? Drelzan interrupted sharply. Do you truly believe they will stay contained now that they know we exist? Now that we have drawn first blood? He took a step forward, his synthetic eye flickering. They will not wait for us to strike again, and they will never forget. For the first time in centuries, the Galactic Council realized something terrifying. They had made a mistake that could never be undone. A red light flashed across the council chamber. The sudden alert froze every being in place. Regzar raised a hand, and the holographic display in the center of the chamber shifted. The feed was coming from Earth. It was a simple video, a single shot of Helena Markov, sitting at a wooden table, sipping from a glass of something amber-colored, an easy, almost bored expression on her face. She set the glass down, leaning forward slightly. All right, she said, her voice carrying the weight of 1,000 unspoken warnings. Listen up, you intergalactic bureaucratic morons. Dead silence in the chamber. You had one job. Leave us alone. Just let us be. But no, you had to get all paranoid. Had to send your little hit squad after me. And now look at you. She smirked. Sitting there. Sweating. Drexel bristled. We do not sweat. Yeah. Helena waved a hand dismissively. The point is, you messed up. Big time. She leaned forward, her voice dropping into something slower, deadlier. You see, the thing about humans is we don't take kindly to being told what we can't do. We were supposed to die in our own wars. We were supposed to go extinct a dozen times over. But we didn't. You know why? She took another sip of her drink. Because we don't give up. Because we don't lose. And because when you make us an enemy. She tilted her head, voice laced with something almost playful. But underneath, there was iron. We make sure you never forget it. The camera panned slightly, showing a window behind her. The council chamber gasped in unison. Behind her, streaking across the night sky, were dozens of small, barely visible spacecraft breaking Earth's atmosphere. Helena gave the camera a slow, lazy smile. That's right, boys. We're coming. The video cut out. Regzar's form flickered violently, his voice sharp. What was that? What did we just witness? Drelzan felt something cold settle in his chest. You started a war, he repeated. And they accepted the invitation. Another red light flared. Then another. Then dozens. Reports flooded in from across the outer systems. Human ships, human fleets, though primitive by galactic standards, were launching in all directions, fueled by nothing but raw, undiluted human defiance. They weren't waiting. They weren't hiding. They were coming. And then the final message arrived. A single transmission from one of the outermost listening posts of the Galactic Council. It was garbled, static-ridden, but the voice was clear enough. A panicked officer shouting before the feed cut to black. They're laughing. For the first time in millennia, the Galactic Council felt something they had never expected. Terror. Meanwhile, back on Earth, Helena Markov stretched her arms, stepping outside into the cool night air. Boris stood nearby, watching as the first human ships broke orbit. He shook his head, taking a long drag from his cigarette. You really think they're ready for this? Helena grinned, adjusting the combat knife at her belt. Doesn't matter if they are. Boris chuckled. You're enjoying this way too much. Helena shrugged. They wanted a monster. I'm just giving them what they asked for. The engines of the first wave of ships flared in the distance, cutting through the darkness. The galaxy had come for war. Humanity was about to show them what war really meant.